The frigid wind cut through Theodora Wilson's thin coat as she huddled against her trunk, her fingers numb and her teeth chattering uncontrollably. The Pacific Railroad tracks stretched endlessly in both directions, disappearing into the darkness of the Montana wilderness. She'd been abandoned here stranded when the conductor discovered she couldn't pay the remainder of her fare to Yreka, California, where her aunt supposedly awaited. "You'll catch your death out here, miss," came a deep voice from the shadows. Theodora startled, clutching her small reticule closer to her chest, her only remaining possession of value. Her trunk contained only clothes and a few mementos from the life she'd fled in Boston. A tall figure emerged from the tree line, leading a chestnut mare. The moonlight revealed a man in his late 20s, with a weathered face beneath his wide-brimmed hat. His sheepskin coat looked impossibly warm compared to her threadbare garments. "I don't mean to frighten you," he said, keeping a respectful distance. "But the next train won't come through until tomorrow afternoon, and these mountains get mighty cold after midnight." "I'm fine," Theodora lied, another violent shiver betraying her words. The stranger's eyes, kind despite their wariness, assessed her situation. "You'll warm by my fire tonight," he said simply. "I've got a camp set up not far from here. You can bring your things, get some hot food in you, and I'll see you safely back here for the morning train." "And why would I trust a stranger in the wilderness?" she demanded, though her body screamed for warmth. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Name's Vincent Irwin. Most folks call me Vince. I run cattle about 15 miles south of here. Was tracking a mountain lion that's been taking my calves when I heard the train stop unusually." He removed his glove and extended his hand. "Now we aren't strangers." Another gust of wind sent a violent tremor through Theodora's body. Death by freezing or risking trust in this cowboy, neither option seemed particularly appealing, but only one offered immediate survival. "Theodora Wilson," she said, taking his hand briefly. "Though I prefer Thea." Vincent nodded. "Well, Miss Wilson, my fire's getting low, and my coffee's probably boiled dry. Shall we?" The decision was made for her when her legs nearly buckled as she stood. Vincent caught her elbow, steadying her with a strength that suggested he could have carried her if necessary. "Just need to get the blood flowing again," Thea murmured, embarrassed. "Happens to the best of us," Vincent replied, releasing her arm once she was stable. He tied her trunk securely to his saddle. "Can you walk a bit? It's not far." Thea nodded, and they set off, Vincent leading his horse through the trees. True to his word, within 10 minutes they reached a small clearing where embers glowed in a stone-ringed fire pit. A canvas lean-to was strung between two pines, with a bedroll visible beneath it. Vincent worked quickly, rekindling the fire and setting a battered coffee pot at its edge. He unfurled a second blanket and laid it near the fire. "Sit," he instructed. "Get warm. I've got some beans and jerky. Not fancy, but it's hot." Thea lowered herself gratefully by the fire, extending her hands toward the growing flames. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come along." "Folks help each other out here," Vincent replied, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. "The West isn't forgiving to those who go it alone." As he prepared a simple meal, Thea studied him surreptitiously. His movements were efficient, his hands calloused but clean. Despite his rough exterior, there was a gentleness to him that put her slightly more at ease. "So, Miss Wilson, what brings a Boston lady to the middle of nowhere, Montana?" Vincent asked, handing her a tin mug of steaming coffee. Thea's surprise must have shown on her face because Vincent chuckled. "Your accent gives you away. Plus, that trunk's got Boston Mercantile stamped on it." "I'm heading to Yreka," she admitted, warming her hands on the mug. "My aunt lives there. She wrote that they need teachers, Thea paused, unwilling to reveal too much to this stranger. I needed a change of scenery. Vincent nodded, not pressing further. Wairika's a good town. Growing since the gold rush days. Still wild in parts, but settling down. You'll find work there if you're educated. I am, Thea said, a hint of pride creeping into her voice. I taught at a girls' school in Boston for 3 years. What subjects? Vincent asked, stirring the beans. Literature, mathematics, and natural philosophy, Thea replied, surprised by his interest. Vincent whistled low. Impressive. Closest school to my ranch is in Hollow Creek, about 20 miles east. One-room schoolhouse with 30 children of all ages and one harried teacher trying to manage them all. The food was simple but filling, and as Thea ate, warmth gradually returned to her limbs. Vincent kept a respectful distance, occasionally adding wood to the fire but otherwise allowing her space. Why didn't the train take you all the way to Wairika? He finally asked. Thea stared into the flames. I miscalculated the fare. The ticket agent in Boston assured me the price covered the entire journey, but apparently there was an additional charge for the connecting line to California. She swallowed hard. I spent my last dollars on food 2 days ago. Vincent nodded thoughtfully. The railroad companies aren't known for their honesty with Easterners. He studied her for a moment. What will you do now? I don't know, Thea admitted. I had hoped to reach my aunt, but she cut herself off, unwilling to reveal that she barely knew the woman, having only corresponded with her through letters after discovering she was Thea's mother's estranged sister. Well, Vincent said, standing to bank the fire for the night, we can figure that out in the morning. You take the lean-to. I'll sleep by the fire. I couldn't possibly. You can and you will, Vincent said firmly. No gentleman would do otherwise. Too exhausted to argue, Thea accepted his offer with murmured thanks. The bedroll was rough but clean, and warmer than anything she'd slept on during her journey west. Despite her uncertainty about tomorrow, sleep claimed her almost immediately. Morning arrived with pale sunlight filtering through the pines and the aroma of coffee and frying bacon. Thea emerged from the lean-to find Vincent already up, tending to his horse and preparing breakfast. Good morning, Miss Wilson, he said, tipping his hat. Sleep well. Better than I have in weeks, she admitted, smoothing her rumpled dress self-consciously. Thank you again for your kindness. Vincent handed her a tin plate with bacon and hardtack. Been thinking about your situation, he said as they ate. Train won't come through until late afternoon, and even if it does, you said yourself you can't afford passage. Thea's heart sank. The reality of her predicament crashed back upon her. I have business in Hollow Creek, Vincent continued. Need to pick up some supplies and speak to the sheriff about that mountain lion. It's on the way to Wairika Well, the first part of the way. I could take you there, and from there you might find work or someone heading further west. Hope flickered within Thea. You would do that for a stranger? Like I said, folks help each other out here. Vincent met her eyes. Though I reckon we're not quite strangers anymore. The journey to Hollow Creek took most of the day. Vincent insisted Thea ride his horse while he walked alongside, leading the animal over the rocky terrain. Though she protested initially, she soon realized he was accustomed to covering long distances on foot. As they traveled, Vincent pointed out landmarks and shared stories of the territory. He'd come west after the Civil War, worked as a ranch hand for years before saving enough to buy his own small spread. He spoke with pride about his modest herd of cattle and the cabin he'd built with his own hands. It's not much compared to Boston, he said with a self-deprecating smile. But it's mine. There's honor in creating something yourself, Thea replied. In Boston, everything was inherited or purchased, rarely built. Vincent glanced up at her, a new respect in his eyes. Most Easterners I've met look down on what we've built out here. Perhaps I'm not most Easterners, Thea said softly. They reached Hollow Creek by late afternoon, a collection of wooden buildings strung along a dusty main street. Vincent helped Thea dismount outside the general store. "Wait here," he said. "Let me see if Mrs. Holloway has a room available at her boarding house." While Vincent went to make arrangements, Thea stood awkwardly beside his horse, acutely aware of curious stares from townspeople. Her Eastern clothes and city pallor marked her as an outsider. A young woman approached, offering a friendly smile. "You must be new in town. I'm Sarah Miller, the schoolteacher." "Theodora Wilson," Thea replied, grateful for the kind face. "I'm actually a teacher as well, from Boston." Sarah's eyes lit up. "Really? Oh, that's wonderful. I've been praying for assistance with the school. We have so many children now, and I simply cannot manage them all properly." Before Thea could respond, Vincent returned. "Miss Wilson, Mrs. Holloway has a room for you," and he stopped, noticing Sarah. "Mr. Irwin," Sarah acknowledged with a nod. "Your timing is perfect. Miss Wilson was just telling me she's a teacher from Boston." Vincent's eyebrows rose. "Is that so? Well, Miss Miller has been complaining to anyone who'll listen about needing help at the school." "Not complaining," Sarah corrected good-naturedly. "Advocating for the children's education." A glimmer of possibility dawned in Thea's mind. "Are you saying there might be a position available?" Sarah nodded eagerly. "The town council approved hiring an assistant teacher months ago, but no qualified candidates have appeared. Would you consider it? The pay isn't much, but it includes board at Mrs. Holloway's." Thea looked from Sarah to Vincent, who gave her an encouraging nod. "I was headed to Wairika," Thea said slowly. "But perhaps this is where I'm meant to be, at least for now." And so it was decided. Vincent helped Thea settle her trunk in the small but clean room at Mrs. Holloway's boarding house, promised to check on her when he next came to town for supplies, and took his leave to meet with the sheriff. The following weeks passed in a blur as Thea adjusted to life in Hollow Creek. The school was indeed challenging 38 children ranging from 5 to 16 years, with varying levels of education. But with Sarah's guidance, Thea quickly found her rhythm, taking the older students under her wing while Sarah focused on the younger ones. Letters were sent to her aunt in Wairika, explaining her situation and promising to visit when circumstances allowed. The reply came 3 weeks later. Her aunt understood perfectly and was pleased Thea had found meaningful work. True to his word, Vincent appeared in town every few weeks. Each visit, he would make a point to stop by the schoolhouse, often bringing small gifts, a book he thought she might enjoy, wildflowers from the prairie, once even a jar of honey from a beekeeper near his ranch. After the third such visit, Sarah nudged Thea as they watched him ride away. "Mr. Irwin never came to town this regularly before you arrived," she observed with a knowing smile. "He's simply being kind," Thea insisted, though her cheeks warmed. "Vincent Irwin is kind to everyone," Sarah agreed. "But he doesn't bring everyone honey." As summer faded into autumn, Thea found herself watching the road on days Vincent might appear. Their conversations grew longer, more personal. She learned about his childhood in Pennsylvania, his brief time in the Union Army, the sister who still wrote to him from Philadelphia. In turn, she gradually revealed her own story, her parents' deaths from influenza, the pressure to marry a man she didn't love, her decision to flee west rather than surrender her independence. "You're braver than most men I know," Vincent told her one evening as he walked her back to the boarding house after a community gathering. "To leave everything familiar behind, to start anew with nothing but your wits and determination." "It wasn't bravery," Thea admitted. "It was desperation. My fiancé was controlling. I saw my future shrinking before my eyes." Vincent's jaw tightened. "Then I'm glad you ran." No one deserves to be caged, especially not someone with your spirit. He reached for her hand then, hesitantly, as if expecting her to pull away. When she didn't, his calloused fingers entwined with hers, warm and steady in the cool evening air. "I'll be back in 3 weeks," he said as they reached Mrs. Holloway's porch. "The first snow usually comes by then. The pass to Wairika will close until spring." Thea nodded, suddenly reluctant to release his hand. "I'll look forward to it." Vincent stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. "Thea," he paused, seeming to wrestle with his words. "Would it be forward of me to call on you properly when I return? Not just as a friend, but with courting intentions." Her heart quickened. "I would like that very much, Vincent." A brilliant smile transformed his weathered face. With gentle reverence, he raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "Until then, Miss Wilson." The 3 weeks until Vincent's return felt interminable. Thea threw herself into her teaching, helping prepare the schoolhouse for winter, and assisting with the town's harvest festival. Each night, she found herself replaying their conversations, remembering the warmth of his hand in hers. When the day of his expected arrival came, snow began falling at dawn, large, wet flakes that quickly blanketed the landscape. By noon, concern knitted Thea's brow as she gazed out the schoolhouse window at the increasingly treacherous conditions. "He won't come in this weather," Sarah reassured her. "Vincent's too sensible to risk the mountain trails during a snowstorm." But as the children were gathering their things to leave, the schoolhouse door opened, bringing a swirl of snowflakes and a snow-covered Vincent. His face was red from cold, his hair damp beneath his hat, but his eyes found Thea immediately, warming as they met hers. "Mr. Irwin," Sarah exclaimed, "you shouldn't have traveled in this." "Had to deliver some important letters to the sheriff," Vincent replied, though his gaze never left Thea. "Couldn't disappoint the folks waiting on news from back east." The children, excited by the unexpected visitor and the worsening storm, chattered as they bundled up to leave. Sarah, reading the unspoken communication between Thea and Vincent, herded them out quickly, pausing only to murmur to Thea, "Take your time. I'll tell Mrs. Holloway you're helping me prepare tomorrow's lessons." When the door closed behind the last child, silence fell, broken only by the soft patting of snow against the windows and the crackle of the wood stove. "You shouldn't have come," Thea said softly, crossing the room to stand before him. "The mountains are dangerous in snow." "I promised," Vincent replied simply. From inside his coat, he produced a small package wrapped in brown paper. "I brought you something." Thea unwrapped it carefully to reveal a leather-bound journal, its cover tooled with delicate wildflowers. "It's beautiful," she breathed, tracing the pattern with her fingertips. "I remembered you saying you used to keep a journal in Boston, but had to leave it behind," Vincent explained. "Thought you might want to start fresh. The leather worker in Helena made it special." "You went all the way to Helena for this?" Thea asked, touched by his thoughtfulness. "I would go much further for you, Thea," Vincent said, his voice low and earnest. "These past months, knowing you were here, it's given me something to look forward to like I haven't had in years." Thea placed the journal carefully on a nearby desk, then reached for his cold hands. "Your hands are freezing," she murmured, holding them between her own. "I've got a fire at the hotel," Vincent said, "and the stable boys looking after my horse. I'll be fine once I warm up." "How long will you stay?" Thea asked, still holding his hands. "That depends," Vincent replied. "The sheriff offered me a job as deputy. Said with winter coming, they need extra hands to patrol the outlying areas, check on homesteaders after storms." His eyes held a question. "I'd be in town most days, at least until spring." Joy bloomed in Thea's chest. "You'd stay in Hollow Creek?" "If I had reason to," Vincent said softly. "Do I have reason to, Thea?" In answer, she rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips gently to his. Vincent stood frozen for a heartbeat before his arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer as he returned the kiss with restrained passion. When they finally parted, Thea rested her forehead against his chest, listening to the steady thump of his heart. "Is that reason enough?" she whispered. Vincent tilted her chin up, his eyes shining with emotion. "More than enough." Winter in Hollow Creek proved both challenging and beautiful. The town was occasionally isolated by heavy snows, but the community pulled together, sharing resources and helping one another survive the harsh conditions. Vincent excelled in his role as deputy, his knowledge of the surrounding terrain proving invaluable when searching for lost travelers or delivering medicine to remote homesteads. He courted Thea with old-fashioned propriety that nevertheless contained a deep current of passion. They took meals together at Mrs. Holloway's table, went for walks when weather permitted, and spent long evenings by the boarding house fireplace, talking about everything and nothing. As spring approached, bringing with it muddy roads and the first green shoots, Vincent grew noticeably nervous. One Sunday after church, he asked Thea to accompany him on a ride to see the wildflowers that were beginning to carpet the lower meadows. They rode double on his horse, Thea seated comfortably before him, his arms around her as he held the reins. The familiar warmth of him against her back, the steady rhythm of the horse beneath them, filled Thea with contentment she'd never imagined possible a year earlier. The meadow, when they reached it, was indeed spectacular, a riot of early bluebells, buttercups, and prairie smoke against the fresh green grass. Vincent helped her dismount, then spread a blanket beneath a solitary cottonwood tree just beginning to leaf out. "It's beautiful," Thea said, turning in a slow circle to take in the panoramic view of mountains, still capped with snow beyond the flowering valley. "There's something I want to show you," Vincent said, taking her hand and leading her toward a small rise. "Just over this hill." As they crested the rise, Thea gasped. Below them, nestled in a protected hollow, stood a cabin not large, but solidly built, with a covered porch and newly glazed windows that caught the sunlight. Smoke curled from the stone chimney, and a small corral stood to one side, containing 2 horses. "Vincent," Thea breathed. "What is this?" "My ranch," he replied. "Or what will be a ranch again, once I rebuild the herd." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "I've been riding out here every spare moment, fixing it up, making it." He hesitated. "Making it worthy of bringing a wife to." Thea's heart stuttered. "A wife?" Vincent dropped to one knee, still holding her hands. "Theodora Wilson, I know we've only known each other since that cold night by the railroad tracks, but I've loved you since you stubbornly insisted you were fine while Shivering fit to shake apart." His voice grew husky with emotion. "You're the bravest, most determined woman I've ever met. You've brought light back into my life. Would you do me the very great honor of becoming my wife?" Tears sprang to Thea's eyes. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Vincent, yes." He rose, gathering her into his arms and spinning her around, both of them laughing with pure joy. When he set her down, he kissed her with all the passion he'd carefully restrained during their courtship, and Thea responded in kind, her heart overflowing. "I want to show you inside," Vincent said when they finally broke apart. "See if you think it will suit us." The cabin was simple but comfortable, with a main room containing a stone fireplace, a sturdy table with chairs, and a rocking chair position to catch the light from the largest window. A curtained doorway led to a bedroom containing a bed frame handcrafted from polished logs. Everything was scrupulously clean, with touches that spoke of careful preparation: dried wildflowers in a pottery vase, colorful woven rugs on the plank floors, bookshelves built into the wall beside the fireplace. Sheriff Thomas brought his wife out to advise me on what a lady might need, Vincent admitted, watching Thea's face anxiously. I know it's not what you're used to in Boston, but Thea silenced him with a kiss. It's perfect, she said. It's far better than anything I had in Boston because it's ours. They were married 2 weeks later in Hollow Creek's small church, with the entire town turning out to celebrate. Sarah stood as Thea's maid of honor, while Sheriff Thomas was Vincent's best man. Mrs. Holloway cried throughout the ceremony and hosted a reception afterward that featured enough food to feed the county. The school board reluctantly accepted Thea's resignation, though she promised to continue teaching until they found a replacement, and to help during busy periods even after she moved to the ranch. Vincent continued as deputy through the summer, building their savings while also working on expanding their herd with carefully selected cattle purchased from neighboring ranchers. By the time autumn painted the hills gold and crimson, they were fully established in their home. The cabin had expanded slightly with a lean-to-kitchen. Thea had insisted she could cook in perfectly well, though Vincent secretly planned to build her a proper addition before winter set in. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the mountains, Thea leaned against Vincent's shoulder. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night?" she asked. "By the railroad tracks?" Vincent chuckled, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "That you'd warm by my fire tonight?" Thea nodded, turning to meet his gaze. "I never imagined then that I'd be warming by your fire for the rest of my life." She took his hand and placed it gently on her abdomen. "Our child will warm by it too, come spring." Vincent's eyes widened, filling with wonder as her words registered. "A baby?" he whispered. "We're having a baby?" At Thea's nod, he gathered her close, burying his face against her hair as his shoulders shook with emotion. "Thank you," he murmured against her temple. "Thank you for shivering by those tracks. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for loving me. Always," Thea promised, cradling his beloved face between her palms. "For as long as fires burn to warm us, and beyond." The years that followed brought challenges. As all lives do, harsh winters, cattle sickness, the normal struggles of building a life in the still wild territory. Their first child, a son they named James, arrived during a spring blizzard, with Vincent delivering him himself when the doctor couldn't reach them in time. A daughter, Elizabeth, followed 2 years later, and another son, Michael, 2 years after that. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts. Vincent's knowledge of cattle and the land, paired with Thea's education and meticulous record-keeping, created an operation that grew steadily more successful. They built a larger home as their family expanded, though they kept the original cabin standing, a reminder of their beginnings. Thea continued to teach, first their own children, then establishing a small school for the children of ranch hands and neighboring homesteaders. Vincent served on the territorial council, helping shape policies that would eventually guide Montana toward statehood. On their 20th anniversary, Vincent surprised Thea with a trip back east to visit his sister in Philadelphia and to show their children the cities their parents had once called home. Standing in Boston Common, watching their teenagers marvel at the bustle of the city, Vincent squeezed Thea's hand. "Any regrets?" he asked quietly. "About leaving all this behind?" Thea looked up at the man whose face had weathered alongside hers, whose eyes still held the same kindness that had drawn her to him beside those lonely railroad tracks. "Not one," she said with absolute certainty. "I found everything I never knew I needed in a cowboy's campfire." Vincent's smile, still capable of quickening her heart after 2 decades, warmed her more thoroughly than any fire ever could. "And I found my whole world in a shivering Boston schoolteacher too stubborn to admit she was cold." Hand in hand, they turned away from the past and toward their waiting children, secure in the knowledge that the greatest journey of their lives had begun on that fateful night when a young woman shivered beside the tracks, and a cowboy promised her warmth that would last a lifetime.